Welcome to the Tippie Leads podcast. Stories from the University of Iowa's Tippie College of Business that will change the way you work and lead. I'm your host, Nick Westergaard. I teach at Tippie and lead our Story Lab program. Each season of Tippie Leads, we focus on a grand challenge in today's changing world of work. This season, we're looking at how you can be the CEO of your life. Previously, we talked about the power of the strategic no. But once you have that space cleared, how do you decide where to double down? How do you apply a high-level managerial mindset to the limited resources you may have? That's what Carolyn Reddick is here to explore with us. Carolyn is an associate professor of practice in accounting here at Tippie. A CPA with big firm experience, she's an expert in helping leaders think like investors when it comes to their priorities. She knows that every choice is a trade-off, and she's here to help us navigate those decisions with more clarity and purpose. After that, we'll hear a story from Tippie student Raffay Malik. Raffay's story explores the weight of ambitions and the moment he realized that pursuing a big dream required more than just passion. And of course, we'll bring it all together with a final Tip E just for you. Ready? Let's get started. Carolyn, you are an associate professor of practice. For the outside world, explain what, because I am practice track myself, and I think it's fun to share. So what does that mean?
Yes, great question. Really what that means is your experience isn't, I would say, like traditional academia in terms of receiving a PhD and working in academic research. Your background is, in practice. You went out and you've done the work and you've worked in industry for a set amount of time. And then you've decided, okay, I'm going to come back and use what I've learned out in the world, out in industry, and share that knowledge with our students. So I do not have a doctorate degree. I don't have a PhD. I have my master's, but the time I spent in public accounting gave me skills that I'm excited to share with our students.
So speaking of sharing those skills, this season here on the podcast, we've been talking about being the CEO of your life and setting a vision, building positive habits, and finding balance in all of this. As you think about what you teach with managerial accounting and how we make sense of all of this data that we have, how does that align with how we think about our lives and the decisions that we make there as well?
It's a great question. And I think oftentimes people think about accounting as really, numbers, right? So it's all numbers, it's all spreadsheets and who knows what else, which is something I always try and dissuade people from because there's a lot else in the field. But I think when you really think about managerial accounting and managing businesses and transitioning that into, okay, how do I manage my life? A lot of the skills can really come across. So one that I think about is, budgeting. Obviously, there's traditional budgeting that I think serves us all well as we think about our financial health. But you can apply those types of things to, okay, what are my goals in life? I'm going to set up some sort of, areas that I say, okay, this is what I value and this is where I want to spend my time. And then checking in with yourself. So we talk about budgeting in our class really in a business cycle. So you say, okay, here are my goals. Here's what I think I'll earn. Here's what I think I'll spend. And then you kind of track to that as the company goes along and as you're working. And then he'll come back and say, okay, how did we do? And that's the really important step is, okay, how are we doing against our goals? And so you can apply that in your life as well and say, all right, this year I had goals of achieving XYZ, or I really wanted to work on something in my own life. And how are you building in those check-ins with yourself to say, am I moving in the direction I wanted to? Or maybe you're recasting that budget altogether, right? Like what you thought you wanted to work on, you had some big new exciting adventure come up and you need to rethink that. But, you can really apply that skill to say, okay, I'm going to set a goal for myself for this short amount of time. track towards it a little bit and then check in with myself. Is it feeling how I wanted it to feel? Do I feel like I'm achieving the goals in the way I wanted to achieve them? And that can really apply to non-numeric values as well.
Well, to illustrate one of those kind of numeric values, when we were talking earlier, you told me a fun story about your brother and CrossFit and
Yes.
food expenditures too. So, an
Yes.
interesting kind of what cautionary tale of of not managing those too.
Yes, yeah. So, I always laugh when I tell this story because my brother is probably like, "Stop telling people this," but it's funny. So my brother was trying. He's very fit, much more fit than I am. But he thought he was tracking his macros. So he was, really getting into exercising in new ways and was like, "Okay, I need to eat, X amount of protein, carbs, whatever." But so I always tell my students, when you make budgets, it's super important that you actually write them down, and they are actually like tracking your expenses in some sort of written format. Because we can all convince ourselves we're doing okay, right? Like, oh, I want to spend XYZ on restaurants this month. And you're like, yeah, I only ate out a couple times. It's probably fine. Like, I don't need to worry about it. But if you're not actually tracking, you can get pretty off base. So the story I tell them is when my brother started doing this, I was around him a lot. And I was like, you're just like, this seems like too much protein. And he was like, no, 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 Caroline, you don't understand. Like, I need a, gram per every pound or whatever. And I was like, no, I get that. Like, I've done that at times in my life too. And we're just like not that different in body size. So like, I know roughly how much that is. And like, I just never was like taken down deli meat the way you are. So I just think we should think about it. And he was like, no, I swear I'm right. I was like, okay, sounds good. And then fortunately, at one point, his girlfriend sat him down and was like, hey, let's just like track this out. Let's just write this down. And he called and he was like, hey, so guess what? You were right. I was eating like over, I don't remember. It was 3 or 4 times the amount of daily protein he should be eating. And I was like, yeah. And he was like, so now I'm eating more carbs. And I'm like, do you feel better? And he was like, yeah, I feel a lot better. So that's just, again, cautionary tale. But the importance, like the takeaway from that is it's easy for your mind to be like, yeah, this is roughly right, right? Like in my brother, I mentioned I do not have a PhD. He does have a PhD in a highly technical area. So he is good at math. He is smart, but like, in your mind, you can be like, okay, about that much, about that much, about that much. And you can be pretty widely off. So it really is important to like actually track. And so I use that example with financial budgets a lot too, because if you're just kind of going on your vibes in your mind, like you're not going to be as accurate as you want to be.
It makes me think of what people are probably getting tired of business professors saying, but you can't manage what you don't measure, and really
Yes.
measuring it, even something as simple as that example. So,
Yes.
speaking of all of the different things that one has to measure, what about defining relevant versus irrelevant costs in your life?
Yeah. Yeah, great question and great point. So that's another area we focus on a lot with companies when we're thinking of managing, businesses is when you make a decision, you need to know, okay, what's really relevant to this decision versus what's potentially a sunk cost. So something I invested a long time ago, I can't get it back regardless of what I do. Or, just what's irrelevant to the decision. It doesn't differ between the two options. So you just don't really need to spend time there and really learning to focus on like, okay, what's relevant to the decision I'm making today can save people a lot of time because as you're trying to decide, do I make a job change? Like, what should I, simple as what should I eat tonight for dinner? There's a lot of things you can bring in that's like, oh gosh, but like, I've spent, so if I stay in the job change idea, right? Like, well, I've been at this company for 10 years and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, whether you keep staying at that company or you take this new job, you've been at that job for 10 years. That's not relevant to the decision you're making today. What is relevant is what, new skills or experiences will you gain if you stay or if you change, or potentially what's the salary if you stay or what you change if you change. But where you've been is the same either way. And also, at the current point, like what your mortgage is. Same either way at that moment. You might be able to make changes to that in the future if you make a different decision, but really being able to root yourself and like, okay, where am I right now? What's relevant right now can really help focus your attention on like, okay, what's the best decision between these couple of options without bringing in, your whole life story to this decision you need to make today.
So, when you talk about making decisions, you often kind of weight it in terms of what you call like the three buckets. I wonder if you'd walk us through that because I think it could be useful as folks are thinking about potential new directions.
Okay, so yes, I think about these three buckets. Oftentimes, this came more out of my past career when I was doing a lot more career coaching with, I would say, like mid career team members. But as you're thinking specifically about career changes, a lot of times people early in their career or midpoint, they focus a lot on like the compensation, right? Which typically people view as dollars on my paycheck. So, like, my current job pays me X amount, this new opportunity would pay me X amount plus 10%. So because it's the plus 10%, that's the better option. And I would always try and pause and say, okay, let's redefine how you're thinking about compensation. Because if you just stay, so fixated on that dollar amount, you can miss other opportunities. One of the buckets is that dollar amount. That cannot be ignored. We all have lifestyles we want to
Mhm.
ascribe to. People got to eat. You need a place to live. So, like, you can't ignore that altogether. That is a component. But then the second one I think about is, okay, what future, value is this role, this opportunity giving you? So if I take this job, if I take this opportunity, am I going to gain more skills that will make me more marketable in the future? So, a lot of times, straight out of college jobs, maybe they don't pay quite as much, or maybe you're working a lot of hours, but you're getting a ton of experience that 2, 3, 4 years out, okay, now you're way more marketable than some of your peers. That's value, that's compensation, that's future value you're gaining by investing time. That's the idea of education. You're not necessarily getting paid, but you're increasing your future value. So that's that second bucket. And then the third bucket, I'll share how I define it, but I would say other people could define it. This is, how well does it align to maybe some of your values? So for me, it was, do I feel like I'm making an impact in my community? And how much of an impact do I think I'm making? And that can vary between different jobs. And, some roles, it's like, okay, you're not doing much on the role side, but it gives you a lot of flexibility to do some of that in your personal life. So, you can bring in that as well. So it's the money, the future value, future skills, and then kind of your own personal value, ability to give back to your community, or, maybe another term for it would be the social impact of what you're able to do.
So, in addition to my teaching at Tippie, I lead a program called Story Lab, and I think our stories are powerful tools in connecting with others, but also in teaching lessons. And your own story, I think about you changing directions in your career and kind of coming full circle to me asking you what it meant to be a professor of practice. But I wonder if you'd share that story because I think it illustrates a lot of what you're saying here in terms of weighing these different things as well.
Yeah, of course. So, as you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, I was at one of the big four accounting firms for 8 years working in audit. And I transparently loved my time at the firm, loved my career. I found it super interesting, super engaging. So, I was not, some of my former coworkers would be like, we had the rough days. And it's like, of course we did, like all jobs do. But I really was happy in the work I was doing. But I got to kind of a pivotal point in my career where really the next step was putting in a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of effort to make a drive at making partner at a major firm, or saying, okay, this is a good point in my career. I was at kind of this stopping point on a client of mine, and it felt like a really natural pause to maybe make a change. And so I spent a year really like exploring options and thinking about, okay, I've been on this ride towards this destination of partner for 8 years. if I'm going to kind of step off, where do I want to go and what could be next for me? And so that was at the point where I really started thinking about those buckets, right? Because just transparently, being a partner at a major firm is a very, very lucrative job. It's really hard work, but it pays well. And so any change I made felt like, maybe not exactly in the moment, but in long term earning potential, I was definitely going to be taking a step back. And so that's really where I had to look in my own personal kind of values and defining out those buckets and saying, well, what new skills do I really want to grow? And what areas do I want to invest in myself? What's important to me, maybe in my value alignment or outside of work, and where do I want to be investing my time and making that social impact. So, I was able to say, okay, XYZ jobs, including the one I so fortunately have. I love my new job. Pay plenty for me to live the life that I want to live and give the future to my kids that I'm hoping to give. And then I will have this, time in these other realms and these other areas to really align to where I want to invest my time for the next, 10, 20, 30 years of my career. So yeah, that's really how I weighed those decisions when I was thinking through, but it is hard. And I also tell students, like, those things can change through your life, right? So how much time you want to spend or how much percentage you want to give to each one of those buckets doesn't have to stay constant. Like, it's totally fine if when you're 22, you're like, I want 95% of my buckets to be in compensation. Like, that's fine. Like, pay off your loans, make some money, travel, like, that's okay. But you have to define that for yourself, and it's going to change as you age and as you grow and as your life stages change. When you get married, when you have kids, if those are things you want to do, the percentages in various buckets will have different importance to you than they may have had 5-10 years back, which brings us back to, is it irrelevant or irrelevant cost to this decision, right?
I'm Kira Ellerbrook. I am a student at Tippie as well as a producer on the podcast. I am also a peer mentor for Story Lab. And today, because we're talking about applying managerial thinking to life, we've chosen Raffay Malik's story, where he describes having to choose between living up to his parents' expectations and attending a prestigious university, or attending the University of Iowa to pursue his business dreams.
Every kid's dream is to make their parents proud, and every parent's dream is to make sure that their child chooses the most safe and secure, trouble-free, risk-free path to success. However, sometimes those paths don't align with each other, and I was in that position 5 years ago. 5 years ago, I was a senior in high school. I was in the most prestigious high school in my hometown of Lahore, Pakistan. It was the high school established by the British Empire 200 years ago for the princely elites. I wasn't a prince, however. I was surrounded by those princely ambitions of going to Oxfords and Harvards and Stanfords. And sometimes I would want to escape this high-achieving dopamine and this environment. So I would go home, only to be welcomed by my two elder sisters who went to Stanford and Oxford. Fast forward 3 months after I had dropped out and started my interior design company, I was about to close my first deal. It was a Friday. A Friday is a family tradition day, but I forgot that. It's family tradition day where all of our relatives, cousins, aunts, and our close family comes together for a dinner. But I wasn't there. Where was I? I was closing my first business deal. It was a deal which I had worked for 3 months. It was worth 6 figures, and I had personally made $10,000. It was my first ever deal that I had closed. And I thought that I had made it. This is the dream. Now I can finally hear the 4 words every child is desperate to hear from their parents. I'm proud of you. I was excited and I was ready to go home and finally feel and hear those words from my parents and be in their arms and feel like I have made it in life. It was a 5 minutes drive from that client's house to my own house of my parents. And I was shivering, I had goosebumps, and I couldn't drive properly. I was driving a manual car with a stick, and I had my left leg on the clutch, and it was trembling. I couldn't drive properly, and the car kept going forward and backwards. I remember that because it was midnight, and I was the only one on the road, so I was safe. As I entered the house, I was not welcomed, and I was expecting to be welcomed by my parents. Instead, they started screaming and scolding at me. Where have you been? Do you look at the time? I remember clearly a word they used, which in local language, Arabic, is called avaragard, which means a street wanderer. I paused for the next 10 seconds, not being there in the moment, and I realized, is this what it's all worth? And as I came back to reality, they were asking me this question. When are you going to college? Have you applied to any colleges yet? Just go to the US or the UK and, just pursue your dreams. And I realized that if I have to make them happy, I'm going to have to temporarily pause my dreams and pursue what makes them happy, because I really do want to make them happy. Now you're probably wondering, big cities, New York, California, London, what am I doing in Iowa? I get that question a lot, and trust me, it is not just the Midwestern vibes of opening the door for everyone behind you or saying good morning to everyone you see in the morning at 7. But the decision came down to a Facebook group. I was admitted to NYU, British Columbia in Vancouver, top universities in Germany and California, and I had to make a decision. We had our batch groups for every colleges that I was admitted to. And in every big university, all the big schools, everyone was promoting something about internships, Facebook, professors promoting their products. That was not what I wanted. But in Iowa's Facebook group, there were thousands of posts of everyone in the batch introducing themselves, writing a paragraph, posting pictures, hi, come and meet me. And I was like, what? Places like this exist on Earth? And that was the decision. And my only condition to my parents was that I will go to college, but of my choice, which is the University of Iowa, where I can pursue my dreams of pursuing a business as well as living a happy, peaceful life and not chasing after the next big thing or the next shiny thing. And it was a really good decision because on the first semester I came here, my friend forced me to take a gen ed classes that we're forced to take. It was a philosophy class called Meaning of Life. I don't know what that means. I don't know why we're supposed to take that class. But there was one lecture specifically in which we were going over the historical leaders. And for the next 10 minutes, I actually did pay attention to the lecture. And I realized that they were talking about the historical leaders who had made an impact. And I was thinking to myself that no one remembers you for how much money you make, or how much of a fancy car or a big house you have. People are going to forget that. However, they will remember for what impact you make on the world. Did you leave the world in a better place than you were born in? And that's when it hit me that I will pursue my dreams and I will do to make an income. However, it is important to make an income while making an impact. And I would leave you with one of my favorite quotations. Be the change you want to see in the world. Thank you.
Let's go back to our guest one last time for a final tip E for you to remember in your work.
I think the final tippy I would leave really ties into what we were just talking about, and maybe a little bit of work, but more in life. Around when I was making that career change, and as I do career coaching with some of my former colleagues or former students, one thing I talk about is really, if you're feeling friction and you're feeling like, okay, I'm going to work every day and yeah, on paper, I like my job, but something's not working. Take that step back and this is my other non-managerial accounting. This is the other side of my teaching, but do a little audit of where you're spending your time. And it's not always going to be perfectly aligned, right? Like there's times in your life where you have a big client deadline coming up and you need to really ramp up work, or, your kid's sick. So you really have to ramp up being at home with your kid. Like that'll happen here and there. But on the average, if you take a step back over 6 months, a year, how are you spending your time, and how does that align with how you would define your values at that point in your life, which again can change. And all of these things are good things. It's like if you've ever done that personality test where it's like rank these 6 things, and it's like health, relationships, and like emotional well-being. And you're like, I don't know, those are all pretty good. So it's one of those things. They can all be pretty good. But if you sit down and you're like, my number one most important thing in my life today is spending time with my kids or spending time with my spouse, and you take that step back and you're like, okay, of my waking hours, I'm spending 85 to 90% of my time at work or away from my home for XYZ reason. That might be why you're feeling unfulfilled, or like you're not enjoying your job or where you are in life. And it could have nothing to do with the role. Maybe the work you're doing is fulfilling and you love it and you're really good at it, but you just have this disconnect with what you value. And so if you can take that step back and look and say, okay, what do I really value? And is that where I'm spending my time? And if you identify a big disconnect, then maybe it's time to go to the buckets of compensation and say, okay, do I need to be working 90 to 95% of my time right now? Or do I maybe look to make a change or, decrease my percentage I'm working? And, again, that'll have a financial impact. I don't want to discredit that. Like very much there could be one there, but the overall picture could bring a lot of happiness to your life and a lot more kind of resonance between, where you want to be and where you are. So that would be my last tippy. All of those things have costs associated with them and benefits associated with them, and everyone has to weigh them, on their own scales. So there's no right answer, but hopefully if you apply a little accounting thought process, you can get there.
And that's a wrap on this episode of Tippie Leads. Big thanks to Carolyn Reddick for the sharp conversation on the investor mindset, and to Raffay Malik for sharing his story. As always, thanks to Kira Ellerbrook for producing our Student Stories segment, and to the Tippie Marketing Communication team for supporting the show. Next, it's the penultimate episode of the season. Tippie College Dean Amy Christoph Brown joins us to talk about leading the Tippie of tomorrow, today. Amy explores how to maintain a vision for long-term planning while still navigating the demands of day-to-day leadership. I hope your day-to-day demands don't keep you from joining us for this next episode. I'll see you there. This has been Tippie Leads, a podcast from the University of Iowa's Tippie College of Business. To learn more about our faculty guests, their research, and more, go to tippie.uiowa.edu/Tippie Leads. If you like this episode, share it with a friend or coworker. Or better yet, subscribe to the show on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you like to get your podcasts so you don't miss a single episode. And if you're feeling generous, consider leaving us a rating or review to help others find the show. This is Nick Westergaard signing off. On behalf of everyone at Tippie, thanks for listening, and go Hawks!